Tribals, Dikus and the Vision of Golden Age is the fourth chapter of NCERT History Class 8. Part 1 of this chapter will focus on the impact of colonial rule on the tribal communities. India's tribal communities have lived in forests and hills for centuries, sustaining themselves through nature and strong community traditions. But the colonial rule transformed their lives. Forest laws, land revenue systems, and commercial exploitation took away their land and livelihoods, pushing many tribals into poverty and resistance. So this is the story of a shift from autonomy to struggle. The topics that will be explored in detail in this video are: number 1, the tribals of Chota Nagpur; number 2, how did the tribals live; number 3, the reason for tribal discontent; number 4, effect of colonial rule on tribal lives; number 5, impact of forest laws; number 6, problems with trade; number 7, the search for work; number 8, some important questions for recap. The tribals. India has been a home to many tribal communities since the dawn of history. Today it is the home to the second largest tribal population in the world. So who were tribals? The tribal people were communities who historically lived in relative isolation, often in forest or other backward areas, and relied on their surrounding environment for sustenance. Some important tribal groups were the Mundas, the Santals, the Orons, the Bhils, the Gonds, and many others. They were not segregated into distinct social divisions by the caste system. They had their own language, customs, rituals, and artistic traditions that were passed down through generations. All those who belonged to the same tribe thought of themselves as sharing common kinship. So how did the tribal groups live? For their livelihood, the tribal groups followed the following occupation. Number 1, jhum cultivation. Jhum or shifting agriculture was done on small patches of land. The treetops were cut for sunlight to reach the ground. The vegetation on the ground was burned for clearing the land for cultivation, and the potash present in the ash was used as a fertilizer. They scattered the seeds on the soil instead of sowing it. Once the crop was harvested, the tribals moved to the new land. The field which had been cultivated was left fallow for several years so that the soil could naturally replenish its fertility. It was practiced in the hilly tracts of northeast and central India. Number 2, hunting and gathering. In many regions, the tribals lived by collective hunting and gathering. They sold forest produce like mahua, medicinal herbs, palash and kusum flowers for dyeing clothes and leather. The Kond community of Odisha, for example, lived by hunting and gathering. Number 3, herding. The pastoralist tribal communities lived by herding and rearing animals. When the grass in one area got exhausted, they moved to another area with their herd of animals. The Van Gurjars of Punjab Hills and the Labadis of Andhra Pradesh were cattle herders. The Gaddis of Kulu were shepherds, and the Bakkarwals of Kashmir reared goats. Number 4, settled cultivation. Even before the 19th century, many groups of tribal people began to do settled cultivation. The Mundas of Chota Nagpur had also settled down, and the land belonged to the whole clan. All members were regarded as the descendants of the original settlers. The reason for tribal discontent. If the livelihood of the tribal communities is analyzed, it becomes clear that their sustenance depended on their free movement within the forest. Thus, imposition of any kind of restriction would have severely disrupted their traditional way of life. The forest laws and policies introduced by the British had put restriction on their free access to the forest, which was vital for their livelihood. Moreover, their familiar life seemed to be disappearing. Their religion and culture was also in danger because the Christian missionaries were actively working to convert the tribal population, leading to a decline in the traditional tribal religion. This also impacted their socio-cultural life. The tribal groups often needed to buy and sell in order to get the goods that were not produced within the forest. This led to their dependence on traders and moneylenders, but both exploited the tribal groups. Thus, for the tribals, market and commerce often meant debt and poverty. So they, along with the British, were referred to as the Dikus, or the evil outsiders responsible for their misery. How did colonial rule affect the tribal lives? It affected the tribal lives in many ways, but first let us focus on what happened to the tribal chiefs. The tribal chiefs had the authority to control and administer the territories under them before the British rule. They decided on the local rules of land and forest management. However, under the British rule, much of their administrative power was taken away and they had to follow the laws made by the British officials. They had to pay tribute to the British and discipline the tribal groups on behalf of the British. They were now even unable to fulfill all their traditional functions. Next, let us focus on what happened to the shifting cultivators. The British wanted the tribal groups to settle down and become settled cultivators. They were uncomfortable with the shifting cultivators because the settled cultivators were easier to control and administer. Moreover, they were a regular source of revenue. They introduced land settlements by measuring the land, defining the right of each individual, and fixing the revenue for the state. Some peasants were declared as landowners and others as tenants. The tenants were to pay the rent to the landowners, who in turn paid the revenue to the state. However, the British were not successful and ultimately had to allow the shifting cultivators to carry on with their shifting cultivation in some parts because settled plough cultivation is not easy in areas where water is scarce and the soil is dry. In fact, jhum cultivators who took to plough cultivation often suffered as they could not produce good yields. So the jhum cultivators in northeast India insisted on continuing with their traditional practice. Let us now focus on the impact of forest laws imposed by the colonial government. The life of the tribal groups was always directly connected to the forest, so the changes in the forest laws greatly impacted the tribal lives. As the colonial government wanted to secure a steady supply of timber for shipbuilding and railway sleepers, the British declared that all the forests were state property. The forests which produced good quality timber was classified as reserved forest, and the people were not allowed to move freely or practice jhum cultivation in these forests. Many shifting cultivators were therefore forced to leave the forest and go to other areas in search of work and livelihood. This led to shortage of labor for the forest department. Labor was required for cutting trees and transporting the logs out of the forest. The British officials therefore decided to establish forest villages, which became a source for regular supply of labor force. In these villages, the jhum cultivators were given small patches of land for cultivation on the condition that they would provide labor to the forest department free of cost. Many tribal groups reacted to this colonial forest law and rose in open rebellion. The revolt of Sonagram Sangma in 1906 in Assam and the forest satyagraha of the 1930s in the central provinces are all examples of such revolts. Let us now discuss the impact of the colonial government on trade with the tribal people. In the 19th century, traders and moneylenders started visiting the forest frequently and asking the forest people to work for wages. The Santals of Hazaribagh reared silk cocoons. The traders of silk trade started sending their agents to the tribal people and offering them loan for growing silk cocoons because the fine quality of Indian silk was highly valued and exports from India increased rapidly as the market expanded. This made the officials of East India Company encourage the production of silk to meet the growing demand. The growers were given rupees 3 to 4 for 1,000 cocoons. They were then taken to Gaya or Bardwan, where the cocoons were sold at 5 times more the given price to the grower. It was thus natural for the tribal groups to look at the traders and the moneylenders as their enemies or Dikus. The search for work. Due to the various British policies, particularly the forest policy, many tribals were forced to leave forest and go in search of work. The condition of the tribals who had to go far from their homes and work in the tea plantations and mining industry was worse. They were paid miserably low wages and they were also not allowed to go home. They were like virtual prisoners. Tribals were recruited through contractors for working in tea plantations of Assam and coal mines of Jharkhand. Some of them did odd jobs in the villages like carrying loads or building roads, while others labored in the fields of the farmers. Some tribal groups like Begas of central India, however, were reluctant to work as laborers as they considered themselves the people of the forest. According to a Bega, it was below their dignity to become a laborer. Some important questions for recap. Number 1, discuss the main traits of tribal communities. Number 2, the sustenance of the tribal communities depended on their unrestricted movement within the forest. Justify this statement. Number 3, how did the colonial rule impact the role of the tribal chiefs? Number 4, why did the colonial government emphasize on settled cultivation among the tribal communities? How far were they successful in this endeavor? Number 5, why did the colonial government introduce forest laws? What factors compelled them to modify the laws later? Number 6, discuss how the colonial rule led to the displacement of the tribal communities from forests. Give example of a tribe that resisted this change and why. In part 1, we explored the lives of the tribal communities in general and the tribals of Chota Nagpur in particular, the birthplace of the tribal warrior Birsa Munda. We examined how the British colonial policies disrupted their traditional way of life, undermined their rights over forests and land, and how many of them were forced to abandon the sanctity and security of their forest. In part 2, the focus will shift to the life of Birsa Munda, his vision, his reformist zeal, and his ambition to restore the lost golden age of the tribals. It will highlight his mission to establish the Munda Raj by challenging and overthrowing the oppressive control of the Dikus over the forest and the tribal land. Thank you for watching. I hope this presentation has made the lesson clear, engaging and easy to remember, helping you to write structured and impactful answers with confidence. If you found it helpful, please like, share and subscribe Indrani's History channel for more enriching history lessons.